No one could have anticipated either the timing or the emotional weight of what was about to unfold. Just days after a tense royal gathering, Princess Anne quietly requested a private audience with Prince William behind one of the palace's oldest sealed doors. What began as a restrained conversation quickly turned devastating, leaving William in tears and raising urgent questions about what Anne revealed and why it mattered so deeply to the future of the monarchy. Hidden within a forgotten wing of the palace rooms long sealed off from daily royal life, Anne summoned William in complete silence, without aides, security, or official notice. The message sent to his personal secretary contained only 4 chilling words: "Tell him it's time." When William arrived, Anne's expression was unreadable, cold and composed, yet clearly shaken beneath the surface. She waited until he stepped fully inside before locking the door, signaling that this was not merely a discussion but a reckoning. After a long, heavy silence, she looked him in the eye and whispered, "Your mother asked for this," instantly changing the atmosphere in the room. Then, reaching beneath her seat, Anne produced a small, dust-covered box, old and tightly bound with a ribbon worn by time. Leaning forward in confusion, William listened as her voice softened. The box, she explained, had been entrusted to her by someone Princess Diana deeply trusted before her death, with strict instructions never to open it, only to guard it and deliver it to William when the crown itself was in danger, taking more from him than it ever gave back. Inside the box lay a single sealed envelope, and the handwriting was unmistakable. Every careful loop of Diana's ink carried weight, memory, and quiet heartbreak. William's hands trembled as he lifted it, as though he were touching something sacred, and for a long moment he couldn't speak. This wasn't a letter written for his childhood, but for now, for this exact moment in his life. And remained silent as he stared at the envelope, then confessed she had kept it hidden even from the Queen, honoring a promise she made to Diana weeks before her death to protect William not only from outside threats, but from the institution itself if necessary. That protection now took the form of a message from beyond the grave. There was no royal seal or emblem, just the words for William written in Diana's elegant hand, and that simplicity made it devastatingly powerful. This wasn't merely a letter, it was a lifeline, a confession, and a warning. William didn't open it right away, sitting in silence as memories of his mother's voice, warmth, and fears flooded his mind, the air around them charged with unspoken truths. Anne rose and placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "There's more," she whispered, "but you need to read this first." And in that moment, William, the future king, trained his entire life for composure, bowed his head and wept, not as a prince, but as a son, knowing that once he opened the envelope, nothing would ever be the same. Yet it wasn't the envelope itself that shattered him, but what was written inside. Diana had entrusted him with a truth never meant for the world, only for him, and the first lines brought him to his knees. The letter began with love, but quickly turned to warning, revealing foresight and names that left William frozen in grief and disbelief. When he finally broke the seal and unfolded the page, the room seemed to close in as the words flowed softly, almost tenderly, "My sweet William, if you are reading this," Diana wrote, "then those who loved me most believe you are ready, and I trust them, I always did." For a fleeting moment, it felt as though she were alive again, reaching across time through ink and paper, watching over him as she spoke of the man he had become, of pride in the man he had become, and of her hope that he would never forget the boy he once was. But that warmth did not last. Mid-sentence, Diana's tone darkened, the rhythm of her words faltering as fear seeped through the page. She warned William of a storm already forming, even while she was alive, a storm that would begin quietly with smiles, titles, and whispered assurances, but would grow into something capable of consuming everything in its path. Her warnings were not vague. She named names. Camilla was written boldly, underlined twice, not in jealousy, but in caution. Diana claimed she had witnessed troubling behavior behind closed doors, whispered exchanges between Charles and Camilla that spoke not only of love, but of power, a hunger for control that extended beyond personal affection and threatened the very integrity of the crown. Even more chilling was her reference to Charles himself, whom she described as a man torn between duty and ego, vulnerable to the temptation of reshaping royal tradition to suit his own vision. She feared that if left unchecked, he would realign the monarchy to elevate Camilla at the expense of the bloodline's honor. Diana even alluded to a conversation she once overheard in which Charles questioned the rigidity of succession laws and floated the idea of modern adjustments. But the line that stunned William most concerned a figure Diana called the silent power. She did not name this woman directly, instead describing someone who operated without robes or titles, yet wielded quiet influence over the future kings, someone who shunned attention but worked relentlessly to reshape the monarchy's inner architecture. William could only speculate who it might be, perhaps someone close to Charles, deeply embedded within the institution itself. The implication was unmistakable. There were unseen players within the palace, their intentions buried deep behind its walls. And as William reached the final portion of the letter, the weight became almost unbearable. In careful, deliberate strokes, Diana expressed her sorrow that she would not be there to protect him from the betrayals she feared were still to come, she believed was coming. They will test your heart, my son, and they will twist the truth until even your reflection feels foreign. But remember who you are, and remember, not all those who kneel are loyal. Tears blurred William's vision as he carefully folded the letter back into its envelope. It was no longer simply a note. It was a prophecy, written by a mother who had seen too much, too soon, and trusted too few. Diana's words were not just warnings, but instructions, a map through chaos and a plea for her son to remain whole. The deepest heartbreak came with the realization that her message pointed toward a future and had kept hidden for decades. Why had and waited so long? Her silence, she now revealed, was never betrayal, it was strategy. For the first time in more than 26 years, the Princess Royal confessed why she had guarded Diana's letter so fiercely, and the chilling reason she had once come close to destroying it. As William sat stunned, clutching the folded pages to his chest, and remained standing composed, yet shadowed by an emotion even she could not fully conceal. Without being asked, she began the confession she had buried for a lifetime, her voice trembling despite her famed stoicism. The letter, she explained, had not arrived by royal courier or official channel, but had been delivered quietly a week after Diana's death by Paul Burrell, her most trusted butler, who appeared late at night with nothing but a sealed envelope and a single plea: she trusted you. Overwhelmed and grieving, and had taken the letter straight to the Queen, who in her own silence made and swear not to act on it, not until the time was right. But right was never defined. It became a silent pact, a shared burden that followed and into every room of palace life as years passed. William grew into manhood, the monarchy reshaped itself, and Camilla stepped into the light. And held her silence not out of fear, but from a belief that William needed to become the man his mother hoped he would be on his own terms. She watched from the shadows, intervening subtly, always protecting, waiting for the moment she would know had finally arrived. Yet there was more she had never admitted, even to herself. Just months after the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and had come dangerously close to destroying the letter altogether, burning it, burying it, erasing it forever as pressure mounted to preserve the institution at all costs. Camilla's influence had grown. Charles was moving swiftly to reshape the narrative, and in feared Diana's truth could fracture the monarchy beyond repair. What stopped her, she now believed, was her sister's voice still guiding her, still warning her. The true turning point came not in public, but during a private exchange and witnessed between Charles and Camilla, where future plans were discussed in language she had never heard before, words like revision, exclusion, and streamlining the succession. In that moment, Anne's instincts sharpened, Diana's warnings echoed louder than ever, and as she looked directly at William, steadying her breath, she knew the time for silence had finally come. Said he hadn't been ready then, but now they were no longer hiding, and his mother she knew far more than any of them had ever dared to believe. What was unfolding was no longer a matter of family loyalty, but of truth versus survival, and while silence had once served as a shield, it would now have to become a sword. Yet William's questions were only beginning, because one name hinted at in the letter threatened to ignite a battle no one was prepared for. Buried within Diana's words was a veiled warning, a single line referencing the woman of silent power, and William's thoughts raced as he tried to decipher its meaning. Was she speaking of Camilla, of Meghan, or of someone buried deep within the institution itself? What and revealed next pointed toward a name few had ever dared to whisper. As William reread the line, the wording unsettled him. Diana had not written in anger, but with cold clarity. This was no personal vendetta, but a strategic warning. She walks behind velvet curtains, pulling strings no one dares acknowledge. Her smile is protection, but her silence is control. The sentence, wrapped in ambiguity, carried more weight than any explicit name ever could. William looked to Anne for confirmation, assuming Camilla was the obvious answer, and shook her head firmly. "That's not who she meant," she said, before finally whispering a name that stunned him. It wasn't a royal, nor even a current public figure, but a former senior aide, someone once central to the Queen's inner circle, trusted, quiet, relentless, and long forgotten by the public, though she had never truly left. According to Anne, Her influence had merely shifted over time, first to Charles and later to Camilla, and confessed that during Diana's final years, there had been tensions never made public, not between Diana and Camilla, but between Diana and this woman. Meetings had been manipulated, messaging quietly restructured, letters mysteriously delayed, all by someone whose name rarely surfaced but whose decisions moved through the palace like wind through stone, unseen, yet powerful. What struck William most was the phrase Diana used to describe her, the architect of shadows. It made clear this was not petty rivalry, but a battle over structure, power, and the future of the monarchy itself. Diana had feared this woman was reshaping the institution to prioritize image over legacy and titles over truth, doing so through whispered counsel and hidden influence. For the first time, William began to grasp the outline of something far larger, a manipulation so subtle it had gone unnoticed for years, not because it was invisible, but because it had been designed to feel normal. And nodded slowly, recounting her own confrontations with a woman, including one chilling exchange over why Diana's charitable work was being buried in royal schedules and why staff close to her were being quietly reassigned or dismissed. The response had been blunt and merciless. The crown must endure. Sentiment slows succession. Hearing those words echoed decades later sent a cold shock through William. He finally understood that his mother had been fighting for more than her own legacy. She had been resisting an institutional erosion, a deliberate reconfiguration from within. And now William found himself standing at the center of a battle he hadn't even known was still being waged. Diana had feared that Charles's reign would usher in not true modernity, but a carefully managed illusion, crafted by someone whose name would never appear in press briefings, yet whose edits would shape speeches, appointments, and even royal protocol. It was never about one woman replacing Diana, but about someone else reprogramming the monarchy from the inside. As this realization settled, the weight of William's inheritance deepened. He had always believed the greatest threats to the crown were external, but now he understood the most dangerous forces had been cultivated within its own walls. And just when he thought the revelations were complete, and produced a second envelope, sealed in wax and marked for the future king. Inside was not another message, but something far more unsettling, a set of instructions. Diana had not only foreseen William's future, she had attempted to shape it from beyond the grave, and as the wax seal finally broke, everything he thought he understood about his destiny began to change. A faint snap, though in William's ears it echoed like thunder. As he unfolded the heavy parchment, he found no long explanation, no elaborate message, only 3 short lines written with deliberate care, stripped of emotion and ornament, each one etched like prophecy. Simple, chilling, unforgettable. The first line read, "Trust the sister who holds silence." William froze instantly, knowing exactly who Diana meant. And the very person who had preserved this moment, who had guarded the letter for decades, was no longer just an ant in his mind. She had been his silent guardian, his unseen shield, the keeper of his destiny. Diana's meaning was unmistakable. When every voice grows loud, trust the one who speaks only when it truly matters. The second line carried an even heavier weight. The line must remain unbroken. Protect the blood. The word struck at the heart of crown, family, and legacy. Diana wasn't speaking of tradition or politics, but of lineage, the sacred bond between generations, and warning that someone, somewhere, might try to sever, distort, or even replace it. This wasn't simply about becoming king. It was about safeguarding what had always been destined to endure against forces determined to rewrite it. But it was the third line that shattered him completely. Do not wear the crown if it costs your heart. Unlike anything he had expected, it wasn't royal counsel, it was maternal pleading, a cry across time reminding him that humanity must come before duty. If claiming the throne meant losing the essence of who he was, the boy she loved, the man she believed in, then he must walk away. It wasn't cowardice, but defiance born of self-preservation and moral clarity. The room seemed to spin as William lowered the parchment, his hands trembling under the unbearable collision of love and responsibility. For a man trained to suppress doubt and master emotion, this was uncharted territory. Slowly, he turned to and, the only living soul who could answer the storm rising inside him. "Did she mean for me to step away?" he asked, his voice raw. "And didn't hesitate." "She meant for you to choose your soul over survival," she replied firmly, the words hanging in the air like judgment and salvation at once. It wasn't a command, it was a challenge, a test, and William understood. This was no longer about moving toward the throne. It was about not losing himself along the way. For the first time, he saw his destiny not as inheritance, but as choice, one only he could make. Yet even as that realization settled, a heavier truth awaited. Diana had left behind more than guidance. At the bottom of the note, written in faded ink, was a final line that changed everything. "Beware the one who smiles with your pain." Beneath it stood a single name, a royal name, and it wasn't Camilla. It was Harry. For a moment, William couldn't breathe. He read it again and again, the weathered ink unmistakably his mother's hand. It wasn't jealousy or rivalry she warned of, but betrayal born from wounded love. Staggering back, William struggled to reconcile the image of his younger brother with the devastating words staring up at him. Diana had adored Harry, everyone knew that, and yet here, in her most private message, she confessed a fear few would ever dare speak aloud. And watched the silence stretch, then gently placed a hand on his shoulder as the weight of that revelation settled into the room like an unspoken storm, and his hand rested gently on William's shoulder. "She never stopped loving him," she said softly, reminding him that Diana's warning was never about condemning Harry, but about fearing what he might become if misled. In her note, Diana wrote not of hatred, but of unspoken pain of a boy who might one day feel eclipsed and unseen, and how hurt, when guided in the wrong direction, could turn into vengeance. William felt a new kind of grief tighten his chest, one that blended heartbreak with betrayal, as memories of recent years, the interviews, the distance, the accusations now echoed with harsher clarity. He wondered aloud whether Harry's exile had been born not only from conflict with the palace, but from the very seeds of pain his mother had foreseen. And admitted Diana had never spoken these fears aloud to anyone else, terrified that voicing them might fracture what little unity remained, and instead chose to leave William a warning that protected his bond with his brother while still preparing him for the truth. The mention of Harry opened another door and had long tried to keep closed. After Diana's death, she revealed, tensions arose around those managing Harry's upbringing, as outside influences crept in, forces that subtly pulled him away from tradition, duty, and even from William himself. What had once been dismissed as youthful rebellion or cultural difference now took on a darker meaning, especially in light of Diana's fear that resentment could be fed and reshaped into lasting division. Meghan's name no longer needed to be written. The implication was already clear. William's grief deepened into realization, a sense of abandonment not just by his brother, but by an institution and a truth hidden for decades. Yet even as the weight seemed unbearable, and revealed something deeper still, the letter had not been merely a message, but part of a pact one even the Queen had never known about. With her voice barely above a whisper, and confessed she had made Diana a promise she never intended to break. What followed was not a confession, but a vow forged decades earlier, during a rare private moment just weeks before Diana's death, when she had sensed something cold and corrosive rising within the monarchy. Diana had not asked for sympathy that night, only for protection, not for herself, but for William. She feared he would one day be targeted not by scandal, but by control, and asked and to become his compass if Charles ever lost his way or if the crown tried to reshape him into something he was not. And had agreed without hesitation, swearing to guard him in the way only a sister could. For 26 years she carried that promise in silence, balancing loyalty to the family in public with loyalty to Diana in private, watching William from afar and intervening only when she felt the balance slipping. No one had ever known, not the Queen, not Charles, not even William. And now, as she looked at him, and saw not just a prince, but a man standing on the edge of becoming exactly what Diana had feared he might be forced to become, lost, pulled between love and legacy. And reminded him, with the authority only someone bound by that vow could carry, that his soul was never meant to be molded by the institution. Diana hadn't asked her to stop him. She said steadily, only to remind him who he was, and hearing those words spoken aloud, drawn from living memory rather than ink on paper, cut deeper than anything William had read. Now it wasn't just Diana guiding him from the grave, it was and giving breath to her sister's promise, and that reminder set in motion a final act no one could have predicted. With Diana's letter in hand and Anne's vow echoing in his mind, William did the unthinkable and returned alone to Althorpe. No aides, no announcements, no motorcade, just silence, purpose, and the weight of 2 envelopes in his pocket. The walk toward the island was slow and reverent, the trees lining the path seeming older and watchful, as if bearing witness. This was not a royal visit, but a son returning to his mother with questions, answers, and truths she had left behind. At the edge of the lake, the world narrowed to stillness. No cameras, no press, only the reflection of a man torn between the life he lived and the destiny he inherited. Kneeling on the cool ground, Diana's words alive in one hand and her sealed instructions in the other, William spoke aloud not out of ritual, but out of need telling her about and the promise, the fear, and Harry. His voice broke as he confessed the truth he had long resisted, that the crown he was raised to serve was not only his future, but also his prison, and that he feared becoming the very thing his mother had tried to protect him from. He sat in silence, watching the ripples across the water, until conviction settled in him like calm after a storm. He vowed that the crown would no longer silence truth, not Diana's, not his, not anyone's. The monarchy would not be his mask. It would either be redefined or it would lose him. He would not walk blindly into the same fire that had consumed his mother, and while he spoke neither of abdication nor rebellion, his resolve was unmistakable. He would no longer follow protocol if it meant betraying himself. Yet even as William found a fragile peace, the secret he believed was private began to unravel. Within hours, whispers of the letters leaked through palace corridors, tabloids ignited, social media erupted, and Buckingham Palace slipped into panic. A single barely sourced line appeared on a fringe gossip blog. Future King received secret letter from Diana. Contents unknown, and instead of fading, it struck a nerve. By midday, major tabloids had seized it, royal commentators spiraled into speculation, and hashtags surged worldwide as the silence from Kensington Palace only fueled the fire. Inside Buckingham Palace, the fallout had already begun.